Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome on into Cougar Sports Saturday. Hope all of you are having a fantastic Saturday afternoon. Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte with you. And Matt, you thought that this would be the off season and things are just going to kick back and put our feet up. No, man. These are some busy times. BYU basketball in particular, they are in the center of the college basketball universe right now.
It's an exciting time. I will say it is. I do have mixed feelings about it, and we can get into this just because and it has nothing to do with BYU, if I'm being completely frank. It's just the frustration with what has become the offseason of college sports. It's completely nuts. It's totally crazy. But to your point, in the midst of all of it is BYU. And let's start with that here in the starting lineup.
The starting lineup. A look at the stories making headlines right now. It's time for the starting lineup on Cougar Sports Saturday.
BYU and the tornado of college athletics. It's a Category 5 hurricane, and the Cougars are the eye of the storm. Rob Wright, if you don't know the name, some of you probably do, if you're big Big 12 basketball fans and fans of BYU. He cooked the Cougars when the Baylor Bears came to Provo earlier this year. But BYU won that game. And a lot of the focus, too, with Baylor, Mitch, was on Edgecombe. He's going pro. He's going to be a lottery pick. Rob Wright, though, was dang good in that game. He was a Baylor Bears point guard who recently entered the portal, one of the most sought-after point guards in all of college basketball. And the BYU Cougars, earlier this week, secured a commitment from Rob Wright. And there's a lot more to the story than that, but let's just start from their ability to land one of the top point guards in the portal.
You talk about fit. There's no better fit than Rob Wright with this BYU program. With Kevin Young at the helm, this is as good of a fit as you are going to find in a portal commitment and acquisition or transaction. It is a big-time get for BYU, and what's crazy is that you lose five-star Yegor Demon. Cougar fans, for a brief moment, for a hot second, they got excited about the thought of him maybe coming back to BYU. He's doing his little wave to the camera announcement. Hey, I
think he did think about it.
I'm doing an announcement at 10 a.m. Look, when he said that, I had a little bit of a pause myself. I'm like thinking, is the unthinkable going to happen here? I was like, this seems a little bit strange, but when he kind of sized it up and his thoughts behind it was almost like a thank you to BYU for Jaeger, kind kid, and he's on the move. You replace him with another five-star, and it's Rob Wright, who was the number one point guard in the 2024 recruiting high school cycle, played with Cooper Flagg at Montverde Academy, that heralded team that was, a social media edit. People were talking about how good that team was at Montverde during the NCAA tournament with all the talent they had in that starting lineup. He's coming to BYU, and he's pairing up with A.J. DiBonsa, Keba Keita. It's just Richie Saunders, the Tater Tot King. We got to still get the official announcement.
Yeah, I was
going to
say it's not official with him, but it's
a huge addition, and
yep.
it's a perfect fit for this BYU program to potentially go make a run at reaching their first ever Final Four.
And he's going to provide a skill that BYU did not have last year. I really liked BYU's guard play with Yegor and Dallin, but it was clear neither of them had the elite explosive ability to break a defender down one-on-one or in a pick-and-roll setting, truly turn the corner and put pressure on the rim. Because if he can, and I think he will, in this offense with Kevin Young, run an effective pick-and-roll with Keita, think about the alley-oops we're going to see between him and Keita, but also the kickouts to Richie. And look, they got to fill out the roster too. I think they got to bring back Dawson Baker. I haven't seen an official word on that yet, but I think Dawson Baker's a priority. Need his shooting and his ability. But if Wright's getting into the paint and kicking out or getting to the rim or throwing alley-oops, it is the ideal point guard for this type of system, this type of play. I think he's an underrated playmaker too. Like, you look at that Baylor team last year, they got Jeremy Roach. We're getting into the weeds here a little bit with names and rosters, but last year Baylor brought in Jeremy Roach from Duke. He was a 4-year guard at Duke, and he was a really, really good point guard. And he was supposed to be kind of the catalyst for that Baylor Bears offense. Rob Wright had more assists per game than Jeremy Roach did for Baylor. So I think that speaks to his talent, that as a true freshman, he came in and competed with a 5th-year senior guard who spent 4 years playing at Duke. So the talent is certainly there.
And eventually, when Roach went down with an injury, this was Rob Wright's team at point guard, and he was paired up with VJ Edgecombe, and he became the starter, and he showed very well in the NCAA tournament and had a huge 24-point performance and a comeback win over Kansas. Rob Wright's big time. This is a huge get, and getting him, it's the addition of Rob Wright alone. If you just look at it from that context, it's huge.
Yep.
And we'll talk with a national college basketball reporter, Tobias Bass, coming up a little bit later in the show. We'll also be joined by Keith Vorkink, BYU Advancement VP, to talk about BYU's NIL situation. And
because that's a big part of the story.
And that's what I was going to get to, is that this is, getting Rob Wright is huge for BYU on the court. But then I think this conversation off the court with him reportedly having a contract with Baylor, according to reports on the Baylor side.
There's a lot of reports here.
There's a lot of reports on it. Rob Wright hasn't officially spoke on his end, but he had reportedly a contract with Baylor, and then he ends up at BYU. How does this happen? And why did he choose BYU? That's what leads people to then say Church is paying for players. That's not happening.
No.
Church is not paying. But BYU's NIL war chest, which was believed when Kevin Young got hired to be one of the best in the sport, it's clearly showing to be one of the best in the country, because you don't get a guy like Rob Wright without having some big pockets, and BYU gets him.
I make the drive from Utah County to Salt Lake County once a week, if not more. And when you make that drive, it becomes ingrained in your brain how much business has been created in this state. And there is a lot of connections to CEOs in this state, Silicon Slopes, to BYU. And I think now that it is fair game to pay players, because that's what this is. NIL is not name, image, and likeness. It is simply, can you fundraise better than someone else? And newsflash, BYU has a lot of sports fans who graduated from the school that have been very successful in business. Ryan Smith is a name that gets thrown out a lot, but he is just one of dozens of people who have started successful companies in the state. They want to see BYU do something that they've never done. Make a Final Four, get to the college football playoff, compete at the highest level. This is something that BYU fans have wanted forever. And guess what? A lot of these CEOs, Mitch, the Ryan Smiths, and we can name a bunch of others. And I'm not saying it's just Ryan Smith, by the way, that's a part of this NIL.
He's just the famous name.
He's the famous name, but it's much deeper than that.
Yes.
But the point I'm trying to make here is now that these fans that have the resources and the money can impact winning and teams, they're doing so. And that's why the war chest is so high, because they are of the belief that Kevin Young, with the funds, can deliver something special to BYU, and there's no doubt we're trending that direction.
And it was interesting, too, this week, BYU, the church education system's commissioner, Clark Gilbert, he had a comment on X where he wrote, the principles for BYU athletics: 1, no church funding, no debt; 2, engage in NIL competitively, but never the highest bidder; 3, focus on mission, coaching, BYU environment. And that's conjured up a lot of discussion, too.
Can I say something quick
about that? But
when he says never the highest bidder, though, that doesn't mean you can't match people's bids and compete. So I think when he says never the highest bidder, that's like if I were trying to hire you, Mitch, and you had an offer for $100K. This is just a hypothetical scenario. I think what he's saying is, I'm not going to come in and say $500,000 when your other offer is $100K.
Yeah.
But would they come in and match that, or do a little bit more, which would technically make them the highest bidder? But I get what he's saying here. I think there are times where they are at least matching high bids.
Yeah.
But they're not being reckless and wild. Like, Rob Wright was going to get paid a nice sum of money from somebody, and BYU decided he was worth that number, and they competed, and they got him. And it's money's a big part of it. Let's call it what it is. Money's a big part of this, Mitch. And if BYU wants to compete for these guys, they do have to be at the upper tier.
And no one's saying that guys would come to BYU in a pre-NIL world with BYU's school. They're just like, we're not saying that Rob Wright was just dreaming of being a BYU Cougar. We understand that money was a factor here.
Huge factor.
We understand that.
Yeah.
It was massive, okay? But at the same time, I think what continues to be underestimated nationally with BYU hoops is the operation.
Yes,
that
the Kevin.
Young, you and I have talked about this a lot. But for listeners out there, and I'm sure there's a kind of new audience this weekend for the show, but that piece of he is a guy that will help you reach your potential in development, getting you prepared for the NBA, being around individuals who have been in the NBA, from him, the head coach, down to the strength and conditioning, the nutritionist, even player development coach. You saw Jordan Brady helping out as an assistant coach this year. He's a guy that's been a head coach in the G League. Like, they have so many different walks of life. You've also got staff that have been at the grassroots level of basketball. So you know all these influential people in the basketball world, they're all kind of housed at BYU.
Right.
And that's, to me, the underrated aspect to what Kevin Young is building. And so when you see programs around the country hiring NBA assistant coaches, that's great. And I think that the NBA assistant coach thing can work for a lot of programs now because the lines are blurring. But Kevin Young's unique in how he was never a BYU guy, but he was ingrained with and connected to a lot of people that are heavily passionate about BYU sports. And you pair up his connections in the basketball world and his staff's connections and their ability to develop, and now they've got a Sweet 16 under their belt. What's not to like? Why would you not want to go to BYU at this point?
That's certainly a great point because it is the missing piece of the conversation. The conversation is centered around BYU being filthy rich and paying out their rear ends because that's the conversation nationally. And yet I think the most important piece of it all is BYU is competing financially. As we've said a million times, they're competing financially. But the piece that is not being discussed is what is securing the commitment of A.J. DeBonsa, Yegor Demon, and now Rob Wright is just what you said. They believe that this place, this staff, this coach is going to get them to where they want to get to.
Yep.
And that's important because you need guys that are coming in. It can't all just be about the money. It's got to be about winning. It's got to be about development. It's got to be about buying into the culture and the program because it is unique. It is different. It's not going to be Kansas. It's not going to be Duke. It's not going to be North Carolina. It still has to be different to work. But that is a huge component to this that has never existed before. So, look, we're going to take a break, Mitch. But let's get to...
We'll talk about more on this.
Well, there's so much more to get to. Let's get to some pros and cons of BYU seemingly being this massive, filthy rich university that's willing to pay 30, 40. No, I'm exaggerating here, but we'll get to that next. A big show ahead here on Cougar Sports Saturday. What a crazy week it's been in the world of BYU basketball, and we're going to get to all of it. But at the forefront of this discussion, and this has really been percolating since Yegor, honestly, right?
Yeah.
Because even Yegor, there was thoughts of him getting a very big NIL number for its time, which is now just average price for a starting caliber player.
It was reported, maybe a $1.5 million. Thought, whoa!
Now that's the going rate for a starter.
Speaking of that, so Jeff Goodman, he writes, he's been talking, he polled 25 plus high major coaches, And this is what he came up again. This is Jeff Goodman from Field to 68. He projects that projected elite guys, top 10 to 15 players, are making $2.5 to $4 million. Projected all league players are making $1.5 to $2.5 million. So that would be a Richie Saunders guy. All league.
Yep.
Projected starters, $500,000 to $1.5 million. And then projected,
which is what Yegor got.
Yep.
And it blew our minds.
And then projected bench player, $200 to $700K.
I should clarify, we don't know the exact number Yegor got,
exactly.
but that was the reported number.
Has been tossed around.
And that, I think, is the interesting conversation to have here, which is it good or bad that whether these numbers are true or not, we're never going to know because we're never going to see the contracts.
Yep.
They're not public knowledge, and there's nothing that we can do to find out the exact numbers. But the discussion, the reputation is that BYU has money falling out of their pockets when they go on a walk. That they are just the richest university that the world's ever seen, and that they'll pay $25 million to field a team. Is that good or bad?
It's 100% good because at the end of
that's not 100% good.
It is a very good thing, Matt.
Yes.
Because
It's not all good,
let
though.
them believe. Let them believe that BYU just has endless money. Like, let people believe. Going into last season, coaches were anonymously polled, thinking that BYU had one of the top 3 war chests in college basketball last season before Kevin Young coached a game. Let them believe that. I just think that BYU, I think what's been great about the Big 12 and the move is that they really are committed to wanting to win.
Yeah.
And I think that what I always get frustrated by is just when people instantly point to, this is the church. Oh, this is the leaders of the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Folks, no. You just do a little bit of research. Maybe ask around, but you'll clearly find out this is not a athletic department.
Fundraising.
Well, the thing is, too, as
NIL fundraising.
As people who have followed BYU sports for our whole lives, BYU has clearly been doing things the right way because they never dipped into these waters when it was illegal.
Right.
They were not getting these recruits back in the WAC days or the Mountain West days.
Or the independent days.
You remember, there's only been one NCAA sanction levied on this program, ever. And that really, when you look back on it.
What do you call Yoli?
Well, that was kind of an individual thing with paperwork, and that was a joke, too.
Yes.
But as far as where you had to strike games from the record books, that's only happened once. And even that was silly when you look back at it now.
Some butterbeer and socks.
In Harry Potter world and some Jetta and dropping off some dollar bills in a locker room. Like, what? What are we talking about? But, BYU, like, no one's completely perfect. I don't want to sit here and say everyone with everything BYU is just so perfect and hunky-dory and they do everything the right way. But I think that BYU does try to be above board.
Yeah.
And now that everything is legal and there's really no bylaws when it comes to what's not allowed in the NCAA anymore, BYU's competing. And they're seeing in the Big 12 how competitive these teams are. No one's talking about JT Toppin getting $4 million. That's reportedly, again,
right.
reportedly. But, I know he's a Big 12 player of the year, but $4 million. Like, this league is competitive. If you want to go win this thing, you have got to be able to financially pony up.
The only thing I think it can, where I would say it might be a bad thing, is does it, one, I guess there's 2 parts to this, but does it drive up the price because people are just so mad at you? They're throwing out bogus numbers that they can't even maybe afford?
I think we're seeing BYU linked to so many guys, and then you hear, well, BYU's not really in the mix for that player, just because the image of BYU now drives up agents' opportunities to say, hey, well, BYU's getting in the mix here. BYU's getting in the mix.
The other thing that I think is bad is maybe not the right word, but something I think you want to avoid. You don't want to be the bully in the schoolyard. I think you still want to be respected by your peers in the Big 12 and by great teams in college basketball, because that's how you make good non-conference matchups. So you don't want to be just the arrogant bully at the schoolyard. Yeah. And I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying maybe try and change the perception a little bit to where people don't perceive you to be just this crazy behemoth that doesn't respect anybody.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that they're operating that way. I want to be clear. I think that they are respectful and they do things the right way, to your point, but you don't want that to become your reputation. You don't want to become known as a Duke or a North Carolina. And I think to me, you want to become a Gonzaga. They are well respected. You love the coach. You respect the heck out of them. They're dang good. They can get you. They can win national championships, but you're not the most hated guy on the planet. So that's where I would just say it's good. It's more good than bad, but you don't have to go so far to where then you are just perceived as enemy number one.
Hated can be good, though, because that means you're winning.
Fair.
At a high level. I mean, BYU football, what was it, on Sports Illustrated? The cover of Sports Illustrated in the 90s, they were listed as the most hated team in America. And that the only reason to hate them was that they were always winning, and you thought they were arrogant. And, like, I guess maybe being around guys like Kevin Young, guys like Kalani Sitake.
Oh, they're great guys.
When you get around them, you respect them, but they're highly competitive. And I just feel like, look, this is an open market. When a guy hits the portal, if you've got boosters that are saying they'll be willing to pay this, and this, or whatever it is, if these coaches feel it's okay, to me, they should have complete autonomy. But I also think that they want to be respectful to their bosses and their peers. We're going to have Keith Vorkink coming up a little bit later this show, Advancement VP, to talk about this world. But I just feel like, give those guys the autonomy. They'll make the right decisions.
It is mostly good. At the end of the day, it is a good thing.
But I know we got to get to break, but to close it out, I know there's a lot more on the line for BYU to have an image of being Mr. Moneybags because of the church.
Yes,
and in the church,
the church has no involvement with this. That's the thing.
And the church has many people. No matter what they do, they can do all this great service work. They can do
humanitarian.
They can do so many service projects for around the world, and it'll never matter to the people because they'll just say they're the most heinous. They'll create narratives that are not true, and that's a tricky deal with BYU. And I think that's why sometimes it's a very touchy thing with BYU, where fans want more transparency, but at the same time, they speak on something, then it's like people that are out there, they're just negative, looking to find the bad in BYU or the church. They'll spin it in a certain way. So it's a balancing act, sure, but I think for the most part, though, when it comes to the on-field products, it's a good thing for BYU sports. We got to take a break. Like I said, we're up against it. We'll have Tobias Bass, basketball insider for The Athletic, talking college basketball in the portal next here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
College basketball transfer portal season is wild, and of course BYU's kind of in the epicenter of all of it here. Welcome back into KSL News Radio. Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte with you, and to talk a little bit of a national perspective on what's happening in the portal, not only with BYU, but around the Big 12 Conference. We're joined now by Tobias Bass. He's a analyst at The Athletic. He's dropping bass bombs on college basketball for various platforms. And Tobias, thanks for joining us today.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on.
What do you make of this move of Rob Wright going to BYU?
I loved it. I really, really did love it. Wright's a real cerebral point guard. Really can get in the lane whenever he wants. Solid shooter. I think he shot 35% from three this season. Just an overall, all-around good guard. He'll pair up very well alongside Richie Saunders, DeBonsa, and Keita. So I think it's a good move for you guys, and he's going to be a big-time player.
He cooked BYU in a matchup earlier this year, but for maybe BYU fans that aren't familiar with this game, do you have a player comp so we can get an idea of the style of play he has?
Just think of your more favorite, cerebral guard. He's a winner. I mean, he's won pretty much at every level. He was successful at Baylor and made it to the tournament in high school, put alongside Cooper Flagg, Liam McNeely, two guys that'll be first-round picks. So he's just a winner. If you want to win basketball games, you have to get point guards like him. And I think that he'll be able to do that as BYU should come into the season as a top 20 team, I think.
Well, and I was going to follow up on that, Tobias. Top 20. Do you think BYU is in a position here to, with the way they're constructing the roster in year 2 under Kevin Young, what do you feel could be the potential of this team? I know people locally are saying this could be the first ever Final Four squad, but from a national perspective, you see it from the whole picture. What do you think?
I want to see them continue to add pieces, but, I mean, if you're a kid in the portal, why would you not consider BYU? I mean, look at what they have. They're running this thing like an NBA team. And, a lot of kids, they want to be pros. They want to be treated as such. Why not BYU? And I do agree with, some of the locals out there. This could be their first ever Final Four team. I think to be a Final Four team, you have to have certain things. You have to have pros, good coaching, be able to shoot, and be able to play in multiple ways. With the guys they have on the roster right now, they can do those things.
Talking with Tobias Bass here from The Athletic here on KSL News Radio. You bring up the NBA piece, and I'm glad you bring that up just because it feels like from a national perspective, a lot of people just look at BYU and say they're overpaying and they're just throwing out a ton of money. And look, they got a great NIL war chest right now. It has changed drastically from when it was with Mark Pope. It's really blows my mind away following this program. But I think the NBA piece is pretty big too, that Kevin Young's got guys like Kevin Durant vouching for him. Like, what do you think of this coaching staff and what they're doing and how they've adjusted to college basketball?
What's the saying? They hate us because they ain't us. I think that's what it is. I think it's one of those things. People they're mad. They're like, no, why is BYU getting all these players that we're recruiting? Well, that's just what it is. You hate us because you ain't us. So I think that people, if you want to get the players, you have to have certain things, and BYU definitely has the infrastructure, the coaching, to pair that with the money. So I do think kids want to definitely play there in the way they run it. I mean, his first year there, coach, they go to the tournament, you double back there and get the number one player in the class, probably the best player in high school we've seen the last couple of years, in my opinion. So I think that what they're doing so far is they've done a phenomenal job, and he's hit the ground running.
Tobias, there's a lot of time left with this portal season, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of dominoes still to fall, but where you see things now in the conference, where does BYU stack up maybe 1 to 16 in terms of where you think they'll finish next season with what they have?
I think they could finish. I want to see, because a couple of teams, they have guys coming out. Some teams really haven't added players yet, but as of today, I think they should be a top 4 to 5 team. I think so. They're going to have to continue to add pieces, but I like what they have, and I think they could be a top 5, top 6 team. And if you're a top 5 team in that league, what are you, a 3, 4, 5 seed, something like that? I could see that. So I could see them being, one of those teams. And as they continue to add pieces, I think you will start seeing BYU as a preseason favorite or some people's favorite to get to the Final Four. Definitely the second weekend.
You talked about, the number one recruit, A.J. DiBonsa, who's going to be joining the program here coming up at the end of the month and getting ready for his one-and-done season at BYU. He recently got dropped in one recruiting ranking down to 2. Darren Peterson, who's also going to be in the Big 12, going to Kansas. He's now number 1. What do you think of that debate between DiBonsa and Darren Peterson? What do you like about the two prospects and maybe how it seems like that's going to be a little bit of a rivalry here in the Big 12 this year?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, DiBonsa, I think that may motivate him a little bit more. I think that he's already motivated, right? But I think, he got knocked on the very last ranking of his senior year. I think so when you see them play, I think you may see him go at him a little bit more. But both are phenomenal players. Both could be 1 and 2 in this year's upcoming draft. Definitely in the top 4. I think so. Both of them will be so. But I think DiBonsa is going to be a great player. For me, he's one of the better freshmen or better high school players I've seen in a long time. I think that he will have a Cooper Flag-like effect at BYU. So I think that what Flag accomplished there, I think DiBonsa could do the very same thing. I think he could do exactly those things. So he's going to be special, and BYU is very lucky to have him. I'm excited to watch him next year.
A few more moments here with Tobias Bass from The Athletic talking Big 12 hoops and BYU basketball. Coming back to that Rob Wright thing, this isn't the first time a guy's transferred in conference, right? This has happened before between BYU and Baylor when Caleb Lohner went from BYU to Baylor. But this one felt a little bit different from a conference perspective. Tobias, does this help or hurt the league, or maybe it doesn't matter having guys transfer within conference?
I think it definitely helps the league. And you can keep a good player in the Big 12. I think it definitely helps it. I'm sure Baylor wasn't happy to see their starting point guard, go a ways away, but I think it helps the league. I mean, you want to be able to keep good players in this league. The Big 12 has been the best basketball conference, probably 4 of the last 5 or 6 years. Definitely, I think so. So I think it helps the league.
And what's crazy is that the Big 12 was kind of viewed as a down year this past season, yet they still had a team in the national title game, had 4 teams in the Sweet 16. Looking at the Big 12 at large, Tobias, Houston adds Pop Isaacs from Creighton.
Yep.
I want to get your thoughts on that. And then also, Texas Tech, with bringing back JT Toppin, the Big 12 Player of the Year. Some of your thoughts on those 2 teams.
Yes, I think Pop, he went to the perfect team for him. I think Pop really, really can score the ball. You got to stay healthy. But when he's healthy, he's one of the better guards, in whatever league he's in, arguably one in the country. In 8 games last year, I think he averaged nearly 17 points. So we know that he can fill it up. And he has pieces around him, right? 5-star Kingston Flemings, 5-star Chris Senack. Emmanuel Sharp will be back. Jojo Tugwood, Defensive Player of the Year, and they'll be back. So Houston's going to be loaded again, like they've always been. This is why they're good, to keep their players and continue to bring in good players as well. As far as Tech, that was huge. A lot of people thought, myself included, I thought Toppin was gone. Especially coming after a season that he just had. From my mind was what else can you do? To solidify being a pro. You did pretty much everything. So for them to get him back and keep Christian Anderson there as well, the young freshman, I think it's big. I think we're talking about BYU included in this. We're talking about 3 of the probably top 6 teams in this league.
Tobias, with BYU making moves like Rob Wright, which I think we all agree is a big move, what other moves do you think they need to do to flesh out this roster? I
know Tanner Toolson is going to begin his visit soon, if not today, very soon. He will be another one person I would like to add, but you're going to need depth. Last year, especially in the tournament time, BYU, they weren't very big, especially down low. I would like to see them add another big. I would love to see them be able to do that, because you're going to have to need that as you advance in the Big 12, and also when you get to the the NCAA tournament. So I would love to see them add some depth there, and then shooting. The bouncer is going to attract a bunch of attention, right? So he knows how to make reads in and out of the pick and roll from anywhere on the floor. If you surround him with shooting, which I know they will do, BYU is going to be even more lethal.
He's Tobias Bass. You can follow his work at The Athletic. He's dropping bass bombs on social media as well. Follow him on X. Tobias, appreciate the time, and hope to do this again down the road.
Yes, sir. Have me on whenever you want. Thank you, guys.
We need to take a break. We'll have much more Cougar Sports Saturday on the other side. And, of course, it's powered by KSLSports.com.
Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday. Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte with you on this Saturday afternoon, the Saturday before tax deadline. Got to get your taxes done, April 15th. I bring that up because I realized, man, I haven't got my taxes done yet. So
Come on, Mitch.
Got it done. We're good.
Already got the return in the bank,
Jeez,
baby.
I got to get that done. Hey, look, it was football with the Alamo
You went on a
Bowl.
lot of not international, but cross-country flights. You couldn't have worked on it then, or were you taking a nap?
Oh, I can't do anything on a plane. I cannot work at all
Movies
on a plane.
and naps?
It is just solely watching videos, movies, internet, preferably if it's Wi-Fi on the Delta flight. That I can't work. I cannot bust out the laptop and do any sort of work. I always tell myself, yeah, I'll probably work and get something done. Can't do it, man. I cannot work on a flight, so it's always just long distance, doing much ado about nothing. But yes, this is the Saturday show before
Tax day.
Tax day. Air on Cougar
So
Sports
are you going to
Saturday.
do it this weekend?
Oh yeah, I'm already done. Got it done. I got it done this week.
Okay.
So when I realized that, then we got hammered out. So we're all good. Roster changes for BYU basketball. Roster's coming together. Obviously, Rob Wright, the big addition for the Cougs. What do you make of this roster right now as it's currently constructed? This is what BYU's got. And we're factoring in everyone that hasn't made a formal announcement or has made those announcements. Just this is where it stands.
So you're saying people who haven't made an announcement, a.k.a. Richie, but we're also factoring people who have said they're returning because there's a few.
Individuals that have not made an announcement but have eligibility remaining, we're including them still in the list. Dawson Baker, Richie Saunders, Keba Keita, Mihailo Boskovich, who said he's coming back this week. If he wanted to own a news cycle, it was not the right week for Mihailo to announce this news. But he's coming back, which is a great thing. So that's your senior class. Rob Wright, sophomore, joins the mix. Brody Kozlowski, Hadim Mbop as a redshirt freshman, Dominique Diomande, AJ DiBonsa, Xavier Staten. That's your roster. And then you've got some walk-ons with Jared McGregor, Max Triplett, Townsend Triple. We'll see what happens there. It was interesting this week with the rev share piece. Maybe we see the walk-ons grandfathered in, which would be great because then all these guys could just run it back next season. What do you make of the roster as it currently stands right now?
It's very talented. The ceiling is higher than any team that's ever fielded the Marriott Center floor. Yeah. And yet I still feel like it's not good enough to win a national championship.
Really?
I feel like they're still 2 or 3 pieces away. Okay. And now they're not the most significant pieces, but as we learned in this year's Final Four, look, I know those were all 1 seeds, but what all those teams had in common, there were a lot of things they had in common, and one of those was they had pretty dang good depth, and a lot of that depth came from the mid-major level. Think about the Florida Gators, the national champions. Walter Clayton Jr., mid-major guy.
Iona.
And he didn't play that much at Iona, but they had some mid-major guys, and I thought that they had good depth. And I think I'm looking at this roster, and I'm seeing 2 holes. I'm not sold that the three-point shooting is going to be good enough consistently yet. And I'm not sold on the size. I still feel like and I don't even care who it is. I just feel like you need a 7-footer that can get you, even if it's 8 minutes a game, in just a big body and can just wall up at the rim. You need that type of guy.
But you got Staten.
But he's a freshman.
He's one of the best rim protectors in the country. He's going to be incredibly raw offensively. Like, I'm not expecting much, but defensively, he can provide that rim protection. I don't like
freshman, raw, and contributor in the same sentence. We've heard that before.
I think he can give you those 8 minutes, though, as rim protection.
I'd want him to earn those 8 minutes with competition against a mid-major center who is 6'10" or higher.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to be as athletic as Keita. Look, in a perfect world, you'd find Keba Keita, add 3 inches, and sign him up.
Yeah.
But I feel like they just need another body, and they need another three-point shooter, because I think there were times last year where BYU went heavy into lineups that included Richie and Dawson Baker because those guys were dead-eye three-point shooters. So you still need that. Rob Wright doesn't give you that. Now, he was a freshman, and there's room for improvement, and maybe he gets to high 30s, which would be huge.
I would expect the spacing in this offense will allow for that.
I hope you're right. But based on what we know,
sure,
he's a mid-30s three-point shooter today.
Yep.
So to me, that means go out and find someone who is plus 40%.
My concern with this team is on the defensive end a little bit. I think defensively,
you need AJ to be stellar defensively.
He's got to be a superstar on the defensive side of things, because Rob Wright was part of a Baylor team that was very mediocre defensively. That's where I feel like I'll have some questions, and maybe it's a little bit of a carryover from what we witnessed in Newark with a completely different BYU team. But defense is going to be something that's a question for BYU. At times, I thought they were better than they got credit for last season. But if AJ can be spectacular, you pair him up with Keba Keita,
Richie.
That's nice to build around. I think Richie could really take another step too. I don't feel like he's at the best version of himself either. I feel like he could be spectacular with the pieces around him. To think that Richie Saunders might be he is the most proven guy on the roster, yet he's going to be viewed in national circles as like the third wheel.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, everyone on the scouting report, please put that down, because you will have instant remorse if that's the case. So I think he can really take a step forward with his efficiency, and that's hard to imagine because he was so good last season. But I like the pieces with this team, and I think they can go so far. And like, you just look around the Big 12 too. Some of these teams, they are building up. I think Texas Tech is going to be really good, as you heard from Tobias Bass. They lose Darian Williams, but I think they'll be okay. Houston's interesting to me because that loss was so devastating, and I don't know if Pop Isaacs is like the perfect fit. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't like him when he was
He's
at
not
Texas
LJ
Tech.
Cryer.
Right.
He's not physical. He's not going to lock you down defensively.
But Kelvin Sampson can get the most out of guys. I get that. I just think it's there for the taking. Like, this is put the chips in, BYU, and go chase this thing, because the following year you might take a little bit of a step back because you can't assume you're going to have the number one recruit.
No, and you're also going to lose some experience. And I think, too, look, while we're talking about the roster, Dallin Hall made an announcement earlier in the week. He's off to Virginia Cavaliers, the Wahoos, and kind of an interesting through piece there is that it's Ryan Odom who took that job. That was the first round match at VCU. So you got to imagine Ryan Odom liked what he saw in that round and went after him. It is good for Dallin because Dallin clearly wanted a different role. And I think the Dallin Hall piece of all of this is what makes me sad about college basketball today. And I think it's worth noting that. And Rob Wright is a better player than Dallin Hall. Yep. I don't think that you can debate that, but I thought Dallin Hall was underrated. I feel like his leadership on the court and in the locker room is going to be missed. They're going to need that from somebody that is returning. Maybe Dawson Baker takes a significant leadership role. Maybe you retain Trevin Nell in a graduate assistant role and have him help in that regard. But losing Dallin Hall's leadership is hard, and I just hate that he had to make that decision and that BYU had to make that decision in today's college basketball, because I do think it went both ways. I think Dallin did not want to come off the bench again, and I don't blame him. You're a senior. You want to showcase yourself. You need a guaranteed role. And I think, Kevin Young, unlike I think most coaches would look at just the numbers and just say, I can't guarantee you anything because it was 7-4, and your shooting wasn't elite, and there were games where you disappeared.
And if Rob Wright's an option, even with Dallin Hall in the fold, BYU's still pursuing that.
Yeah.
And he's the second string guy
again. And so he did what was best for him. I just hate that that's kind of where we are, because I would like to live in a world in which, Dallin Hall could still be a contributing piece to this team, but
he dreamed to BYU, and that's what's hard.
Yes.
LDS guy, served a mission guy. That matters at BYU. That's the fabric. That's the secret sauce.
Yes, and had significant moments at BYU. Yes. Significant. And if Jaeger's not on the roster last year, I think he has a different year. That just never seemed to work. There were at times where they coexisted nicely, but it was never the fit we wanted it to be. And that part of it is hard for me with college sports, because I love Dallin Hall, man. I loved his game. I love the way he represented the school. And to see him in another uniform, I don't like it.
It was very surreal to see him in a Cavaliers Virginia uniform. Like, that was, I mean, I know it was not the greatest Photoshop, but that was surreal, because Dallin Hall is just, we had him on the show when it was COVID. He was getting ready for prom. Remember that? It was COVID prom. He's like, thanks for having me on, guys. And he's getting ready for prom later that night. And now he's going to Virginia. You never would have thought in your wildest dreams that guy would not be finishing as a BYU Cougar, but that is the era that we are in today. We're taking a break. That's hour number one. Hour number two coming up. We'll have Keith Vorkink, BYU Advancement VP, next here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back into KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the BYU Cougars. Exciting times in BYU athletics. It was an incredible year on the athletics front, and joining me now to talk about BYU athletics and this unique world in college athletics right now is BYU Advancement Vice President Keith Vorkink. And Keith, thanks for taking the time to join me today.
Happy to join you, Mitch. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I really appreciate you hopping on board here. And just for our listeners, too, that maybe aren't familiar when I say Advancement VP, we've talked before in the past, but what does your title, embody with your role within BYU as a school and then also on the athletic side as well?
Yeah, sure. This is a question I get a fair amount. The title Advancement Vice President doesn't really convey sort of the responsibilities that I carry. As a general description, I oversee most of the activities and responsibilities in organizations that have a significant touch to the world off campus. So that includes athletics. So athletics reports up to me. Tom Homo reports to me. But I also have responsibilities for BYU Broadcasting, BYU TV, for our alumni and external relations, our strategic communications, messaging, branding, and university relations, which is VIP people, some of our church leadership. So the things where it connects deeply to the outside world reports up to me. And in this case, I work very closely with the athletics program.
And the athletics program right now is a big talking point in college basketball in particular right now. And I think there's a lot of, and I'm glad that you hopped on because there's a lot of, I think, inaccuracies. I mean, following BYU sports as close as I do, and just seeing the chatter that goes on, it's kind of crazy that people come up with this stuff. And I got to imagine for you, it's even more crazy because you're so closely connected to the university and the athletic department. So I'm just curious, when it comes to NIL, what are some of the core principles around BYU and how they view NIL?
Well, you're exactly right, Mitch. This is a topic where it seems like everybody has a theory about what's happening here, and many of those aren't necessarily grounded in the truth. But people can have their own speculation. We do have, we have a strategy that working with Tom and President Reese and up our line that we've adopted in the presence of this new landscape of intercollegiate athletics, which allows student athletes to receive NIL. And that strategy's really founded on a handful of principles. The first principle, which is the most important to us, is while the university itself has, we're founded, supported, and guided by our sponsoring church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and there's a very tight governance and relationship with the church for the university. There is no funding of NIL through the church. There's no funding of the athletics program through the appropriation that the university receives from the church. Their revenues come from other streams, but not from any of that appropriation that comes from the church.
And so just to follow up on that, no funding from the church. Is there any role, though, that the church has when it comes to NIL? Do they give advice on how to handle these things? Because the numbers that get tossed around are sometimes inflated and pretty big, or do they give any sort of advice to the university and the athletic department?
It's a great question. And maybe what I would say is we sort of have three principles, and the no church funding or support is one of them. The other two are that we actually do engage in the NIL landscape. And the way we describe our engagement is we're competitive, but we're not the highest bidder. And I'll pause here for a moment. We have one more, but the church was very much involved in the vetting of that strategy. So the church is involved our governance provided, counsel and approval at a high level of how we wanted to approach it. We tend not to get, deep engagement, and Elder Gilbert's even said this in other settings. They're not vetting individual deals in the NIL space. We'll give them updates on occasion, but they were very much involved, deeply involved in the establishment of that principle. The last principle we have in this is athletics, but it ties to NIL is we believe our competitive advantage, the strategy that we hang our hat in, is to get student athletes here that also buy into the mission of the university. In basketball, we believe that also includes buying into our coaching staff and what they bring to the table and the environment that BYU offers. We want to ensure that that interactions with student athletes understand and are interested in or embrace the environment, the mission of the university, the coaching staff, and not here just because of NIL contracts.
Just to follow up, you did see that, I think, this week with Yegor Demon, when he was talking about his entry into the NBA, but he did clearly have an impact on his time at BYU this 1 year, talking about faith and God, and probably never would have thought his wildest dreams would be at BYU, but it clearly had an impact on him.
Yes, and so he's a great example of this, because last year there was a fair amount of discussion about the significant NIL contract that he entered into with the university. We haven't said, but others have said. Yeah. He had higher paid options other places, but he loved what Coach Young brought to the table, and what environment, what culture he created around the basketball program. And you heard at his press conference announcing that he was going into the draft what kind of impact that had on him. And to me, that's a manifestation of one case of success when we've done it right for the individual student athlete. And we also believe this strategy can lead to being successful competitively. We're trying to win too. We're trying to do multiple things. And Yegor was a great example of someone who had great skill and talent, but also came here because of not just the money, but because of the basketball environment, the mission environment, and those two things work together for success.
Talking with BYU Advancement VP Keith Vorkink here on KSL News Radio, and this is a very unique time too, Keith, with revenue sharing on the horizon. There still has to be, the settlement has to be voted on or signed off on by the judge. It was taking place this week. Right. But your thoughts on revenue sharing and BYU's approach to revenue sharing and how how BYU is viewing this potential upcoming landscape in college athletics.
Yeah, that's a question that every single athletic department is wrestling with, and Tom's done a really thoughtful job about organizing an implementation in the event that the House case is settled as we anticipate it to be settled, or at least the way it's being discussed to be settled, so that we will participate in it. The same principles that apply to NIL, it's the strategy. Again, we won't have any church funding. We'll engage in this case, we could insert revenue sharing competitively, but it's not going to be just trying to pay the highest amount to be the highest bidder, because we want student athletes to come here with an understanding, a willingness, an embracing of our distinctive mission, the environment, and those sorts of things. So yeah, we'll figure out a way that let's assume for a second that the House settles as currently described. Then universities will have somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $21 million of revenue share, and that's permissible. It's not required, but up to that amount, we'll participate. What we would describe as competitively in it. We may not be at the highest amount, but it will be a part of our strategy, hoping still not to take off the table the stuff that's most important to us.
Has there been, just to follow up on that, has there been a push from the Big 12, to say that, kind of advising all the institutions to try to get competitive to that $20.5 million mark?
I think there's been counsel. There has to be competitive for sure. This will put a strain on athletic departments' budgets, and so but they understand that at the conference level that lack of not being competitive in that space could be problematic.
Yep.
And there's not been for us a sense like you have to be at the maximum, but they do. They're hoping, they're providing solutions, or at least recommending solutions that can allow the universities and the conference to be able to be competitive.
Last thing for you, Keith, and appreciate the time here. I'm curious, what's the role that, because with revenue sharing, there's a lot of talk about the collectives and how that will work. With the Royal Blue Collective that's, connected to BYU, how will that relationship continue? What's it like now, and how will that continue in the revenue sharing era?
Well, that's a good question, and one I don't think we know all of the answers to. What I can say is there's governance right now around how tight the relationship between a collective and the athletic department can be. I'm not suggesting there's no relationship. There's among other things, a corporate sponsorship relationship that allows them to be the official collective of the athletic department. We do anticipate that if the House is settled, at least some function, if not the majority of, would be allowed to move in-house. Does that mean the Royal Blue Collective goes away? Not necessarily, but perhaps. That's why it's hard to know exactly how all this sorts out once the House settles. There won't be a formal preclusion of collectives, but if the House case is settled, there'll be some third-party validation that will have an impact on how collectives have been functioning in a pretty significant way, and so we'll see what sorts out if that's settled, and what impact these policies and regulations would have on the current state of collectives.
These are fascinating times. I could go on and on with you, Keith, about this stuff. It's really fascinating, and you're in the thick of it all. But I know you're a busy guy, and really appreciate you taking the time to, kind of explain to our listeners what's going on and give the BYU perspective in all the noise. And really, again, appreciate the time.
I appreciate it, Mitch, because we have a strategy that's a little different than most universities, and so I think right now there's many people out there who kind of struggle to get it. And you're giving us a chance to at least tell our story, and perhaps as we do this more and more, people will try to understand. We're not, everybody can have their own strategy.
Sure.
We've decided this is ours, but it's an atypical one, and you're giving us a chance to at least help inform people on the way we're trying to do this.
He's Keith Vorkink, Advancement VP here at BYU, and again, appreciate the time spent with him here on KSL.
Welcome back in. It's Cougar Sports Saturday, breaking down an eventful week, in particular related to the transfer portal for college basketball, which is off the hook. And that was, Mitchie, a fantastic conversation you had with Keith Vorkink, who is in a lot of pictures and videos in locker rooms. He's very, very close to all things BYU athletics. I thought there's some really insightful stuff there, in particular just about the kind of operation and how BYU is working. And I love that he's willing to speak, because there's just so much crap that's out there. AJ, 7, 8, 9, 10, like the number just continues to rise. Rob Wright, 2.5, 3.5, who knows what it is. It was just nice to hear from Keith Vorkink that we're going to compete, but we're not going to be crazy. Because that, to me, is the perception, is that BYU's going bananas, and he's telling us we're not being reckless.
And the perception out there is that it's coming from the church. That's where it gets a little bit nasty, and that's that's why I appreciate Vorkink hopping on to, share his views on the topic. That's what we want to do here on the show, is to have all the sides here. We're going to report and talk about, what the commentary is nationally. But at the same time, let's hear from BYU's side of it as well. And that's someone who's working closely with BYU's NIL operation. And I think it's an interesting topic because in this era where money is so it's in your face and you've got to invest at such a high level to win, for a program and an athletic department in general that used to be they're going to do more with less. We had Val Hell on last football season, and he was talking about how Lavelle Edwards, the great Lavelle Edwards, just every year signed a 1-year contract, and that was that. And he was probably the lowest paid coach in the Mountain West when the league began in 1999. The lowest paid coach, and that was Lavelle when he was year 27. He was established as they come, lowest paid coach in the Mountain West. And now a quarter century later, you're talking about one of the deepest pockets in NIL. That's why it's just so crazy. Even a couple years ago, Matt, when Mark Pope, we're in the Marriott Center Annex, and the big story was, how'd you lose Quez Glover? Quez Glover, a guy that was Florida, Samford, BYU, K-State, now Ohio State, and does he still have eligibility? I don't know, but Mark Pope's like, we lost him to NIL. Couldn't keep him. 35 to 40% of my job is spent in NIL efforts. I got to rally the troops better. That was less than 2 years ago. And now we're having this conversation. So that's where it's kind of jarring a little bit.
Totally.
And so I appreciate Vord King hopping on and sharing his side. And I think it's insightful because this is a time where, I'm curious to hear what happens with, and see what happens moving forward for BYU.
To me, it's this isn't a mystery, Mitch. It's very understandable, and I'll break it down in simple terms. We are seeing the manifestation of a national fan base put their fingerprints on winning because they can. And if anything, to me, it's a testament to Cougar Nation and how much this fan base loves BYU athletics and how much they want to win and do something special. We get the chance to go to all the home games but we make sure to get to football and basketball. And in basketball in particular, if you look at Courtside Road, dude, and I've done this many times, I'm sure you have too, Ryan Smith is there. Josh James of Domo is there. Blake Roney, he's no longer with New Skin, but New Skin's name is all over BYU. Yep. He sits courtside. Some people from Bucked Up, they sit courtside for the whole Conor McGregor thing.
He was night where Rob Wright was tearing it up. We need Conor McGregor on the show to break it down. What'd you think of Rob Wright, mate? That's awesome.
I know I'm forgetting another dozen or so CEOs who want to invest. And previously it was what? Hey, donate to the Cougar Club, man.
Yeah.
Now it's, I don't want to say forget the Cougar Club because it still has value, but can you give these guys some money? Yeah, if we're going to win. And to your point about Pope and Young has clearly inspired these guys to pony up because he has inspired them in a way and he's inspired me in a way.
He's inspired everyone at BYU.
Yes.
Let's call it what it is.
Great point, Mitch. He's inspired all of us to believe that to what's that? Is it a Sprite commercial? Anything is possible.
Kevin Garnett. It's true, though. I mean, you think about where BYU basketball was entering the Big 12. They were predicted 13th out of 14 teams in the league. And many thought, are they going to win a game in the Big 12? They struggled at the tail end of the WCC. Kevin Young's done a remarkable job. Mark Pope gave BYU the chance to believe they could win. I think that was the key in many respects. Is they tasted a little bit of success. They're we don't want to lose that. So they went all in to go get Kevin Young. And then Kevin Young was he didn't need the job, but it was one of the jobs that piqued his interest. And, and then when he was talking with Billy Lang and St. Joe's, finding out about the NIL efforts, he was like, okay, this is going to be competitive. We sat in Kevin Young's office last summer, and we talked to him about NIL. He's like, we're competitive. And it was we're the best, but we are competitive. And that's all they need to be. If BYU's in a position of competitiveness with their peers in power conferences, BYU then has these X factors with the fan base, as you pointed out, with the networking, that can be a real difference maker that maybe can separate them from the pack. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll get to some more talk. We'll also hit on some BYU football as well, and we'll look ahead to BYU basketball next season. It's Cougar Sports Saturday on KSL News Radio.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday. It's Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte with you. You know, Matt, there's some things in life that I love. I love a good game day. Like, I love a BYU football or basketball game day. Another thing that I oddly really enjoy, them way too early lists, man. I love a good way too early list. I feel like I'm the CEO of way too early list.
Let me add to that. Transfer portal offseason.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
And has that replaced high school recruiting for you?
It has. Like, it's
because
just,
you were the high school recruiting. Tell the listeners your psychotic ways as a child.
Well, high school recruiting, it's still a big thing. But as a child, 8 years old, getting checked out of school. And it's signing day. We're going down to the Cougar Club room on a weekday at 1 in the afternoon. Going to hear, Coach Crowan and all this.
Some kids are playing Red Rover, and Mitch is driving I-15 down to Provo to get a signing day recap.
Getting a signing day recap, asking questions, getting the day after signing day, the USA Today, all 115 teams at the time, all their Division 1A classes, and just looking at the names and going, that guy kind of sounds legit. Oh, who's Dontrell Moore from New Mexico? That guy I'm just kidding. But no, it's just I've always loved recruiting, and high school recruiting's still awesome, and especially how BYU basketball and football are recruiting right now. We'll get to football coming up too, because they landed a big time addition, dude, the highest rated guy in the Kalani era.
That would have led the show a couple years ago.
We would have been wall to wall, and it's geez, what's going on with hoops? It's not. It's a big story, but it's just this week for context. But transfer portal is just very interesting because also, too, it just feels like you've got to have this nice blend of it's all about retention and then getting those veteran portal pieces to supplement the roster. But, there's always exceptions when you look at an A.J. DiBonsa being a number one guy. I mean, he is an exception as they come. But, you got to be older in college basketball. And football, I feel like there's still that place to be maybe more traditional. That's what BYU football is taking an approach with this year. They want to retention and not dip into the spring portal. They'll keep their eyes open if there's something that's a fit, but they made it pretty clear coming out of spring ball that they are pretty happy with their roster and they want to just continue to develop players rather than dipping into the portal. But, yeah, I really enjoy the recruiting side of all of it and bringing together rosters, and roster building for BYU sports right now is just fascinating because nothing's holding them back, Matt. And I think that's what's pretty exciting.
And all that roster building is, to a previous point, and another thing you love, it has juiced the preseason lists for BYU basketball. CBS Sports has BYU. Look, this is pre-Rob Wright too. But CBS Sports has them at number 5, USA Today number 5, Athletics 6, Sports Illustrated 7, 247 Sports 8, and then ESPN and Fox 16 and 21. Come on, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, John Fanta, Fox Sports. Come on, John. 21?
21?
Where you at, man?
Richie plus AJ plus Kata plus some experienced dudes.
Richie, AJ, and Kata alone. That's big time. That, to me, is a top 15 team at a minimum. I think top 10.
And then you throw in Rob Wright. Next year has the chance to be the most special and fun and successful period of BYU athletics we've ever seen. Even, look, we'll get to this later, but even women's hoops is having a bit of a glow up.
They are. Lee Cummard's he's the right fit, man.
I think he is. with the exception of baseball, it feels like everyone is at least maintaining their spot or ascending in this athletic department. It's pretty remarkable. So, geez. Look, football and basketball ended this year ranked number 13. Now, football fell short of their goals. Men's hoops exceeded their goals, right? Because I felt like before the season began, if one of two things would have happened, it was a success for the first year of Kevin Young. If Yegor got drafted in the first round, or you made it to the NCAA tournament and won a game, either one to me was a successful year. And you blew it out of the park. So hoops is fantastic. Football, great year. Considering what was in front of them for the taking, a slight disappointment, but still 11-2. Hard to argue with that. Do you think next year, Mitch, there's possibility for these teams to both end on a high note, maybe even higher than this year?
I do. I think for both teams, they could. I think BYU football is good enough to win the Big 12. I think BYU men's basketball could reach a Final Four. You're probably hearing that and thinking, oh no, he's going blue goggles.
He's drinking that Kool-Aid.
I just think there's so much potential there. And I think, too, what gives me the belief that could happen with basketball in the Final Four is the coaching staff. Just a lot of belief in Kevin Young. And then for football, you've got so much retention with the coaching staff. I think the defense is going to be lights out. I think the offense, I really want to see Jake be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. It's interesting this week when we talk about way too early list, for some reason it seems like there's been a lot of national outlets that have been putting out top 10 quarterback list. And I'll admit I haven't dove into outside of the Big 12 quarterbacks much as of yet. But you look at these way too early top 10 quarterback lists in college football, and I'm thinking, maybe Jake could be. Maybe he could be a top 5 quarterback next year. And I bring that up because in the Alamo Bowl, that's what Roderick was telling Dave Pasch, and he's kind of said it to in interviews too, that they want him to be a top 5 quarterback in college football. And Jake has even said he wants to
win the Heisman
and be a Heisman finalist at a minimum. So if he does that, BYU can win the Big 12. So
if he's a Heisman finalist, they're
going to the playoffs
and maybe win a game.
Yeah, I think at least they're in the playoffs.
Yep,
and that's just huge stuff for BYU. So everything's right there for them, and there's this momentum. And amidst all this is a athletic director search, which still is ongoing.
That has become a afterthought, considering everything isn't that crazy?
Ever since Tom announced his retirement, BYU men's basketball kicked it into high gear. They had that win at West Virginia, which was kind of the breakthrough. And then ever since, it was just
a rocket ship.
They've been taken off. Like they need someone to announce a retirement to get them turned around. But all seriousness, I think there's just a lot of momentum, and now you got to go deliver. And that's the challenge next year for both teams. No one's sleeping on them. There's going to be so many eyes on those teams that it's a matter of now breaking through. And that's always a challenge for BYU when expectations are placed on these programs. They tend to not deliver.
The challenges for each team next year, I do think, are different. I think one of the strengths for BYU football will be the biggest challenge for BYU hoops. I think BYU football has a great locker room. I think they have outstanding chemistry. They have great continuity. That's not going to be what basketball has. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be very difficult for Kevin Young to rally the troops and get them on the same page, because this year's group, they were bought in to Kevin Young, and it felt like, I hate to even use this term, but it did feel like best locker room in America type vibes. Yeah. You know, that old slang that Mark Pope had in his early tenure. That was a good locker room. They got along, and that chemistry, it got them some wins, quite frankly, in Big 12 play. This year's team, there's a lot more money at play. There's a lot of faces that are new, and that's going to be a challenge. For football, Mitch, I think the challenge, and you touched on it, is how much improvement can you squeeze out of Jake Retzlaff? I think this defense is at least going to be as good as they were last year, if not better. I believe that even those question mark position groups, defensive line, on in particular on the edge, because you short up the interior with Keanu Donavasa, and then defensive back, can you replace Jacob Robinson
and Mark
Collins. I think they can. I'm not worried about it. I think this defense is going to be dang good. I like the pieces around Jake. To me, it's just simply you got to be better than 60% completion percentage. You got to be better. Your touchdown to INT ratio. We got to, please, 4-1. We need 4-1. Anything better than 4-1, you are talking about being one of the best quarterbacks in college football. But at 4-1, let's say you throw 28 TDs and 7 picks, you got a chance to win the Big 12. Yep. So it's gonna be fun to watch. I mean, this is what we've all wanted our whole lives. It is an athletic department that is all in, trying to win this thing, and that's where we're going for in 2025.
It is going to be a lot of fun, and we, of course, will be covering all of it here on KSL Sports, Cougar Sports Saturday, every week. If you miss any part of the show, subscribe to the podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, we're taking a break. We'll get to some BYU football talk and maybe an early look at BYU basketball schedule next season.
Welcome back in. Wrapping up hour number 2 on an eventful Cougar Sports Saturday, and we're not done yet. We got some football ahead. Keanu Tanavasa had a conversation with him. We both did at the end of spring football. We'll be rolling out throughout the next couple of weeks these conversations we've had with key figures within the BYU football program as they get ready for their final kind of off-season period before they report for camp and get ready for the season. So hour number 3, don't go nowhere. And speaking of football, man, we sort of joked about this in the last segment, but on the recruiting trail, they land a huge commitment, and yet in previous years, wall-to-wall coverage, and we're barely getting to it at the end of hour number 2, but take us behind the scenes and help us understand what this means. 4-star tight end Brock Harris from St. George, Utah, commits to BYU.
Brock Harris, not just because his name is Brock, but you're talking about a Brock Bowers type player at the tight end position, an elite prospect, one of the best tight ends in the country in high school football out of Pineview High School. He picks BYU, Matt, over Michigan, over Georgia, over Oregon, Utah. Brock Harris commits to BYU, and he does it early, too. Initially, he had a bunch of official visits lined up for May and June. Instead, he shuts down the recruitment and gets it done and commits to BYU. Massive get for Kalani Sitake's program. He has said, Brock Harris has, that he intends to serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So we'll see what kind of the timeline looks like as far as what year he matriculates into the program. But a huge get. And it's kind of crazy, too, that Kalani's entering year 10 in the program, and he's had some really good football players during his time at BYU. Brock Harris is the number 1 recruit that he's landed a commitment from. And since 2000, he's the third highest rated prospect BYU has received a commitment from, according to the composite rankings from 24/7
Who are the 2 higher
Sports.
ones?
Ben Olsen, Ofa Moetau. Those were 2002 and 2003.
Wow. So he's ahead of Jake Heaps. He's ahead of
he's ahead.
Reiner Swanson.
Scott Young was a 2002 guy. So you're talking about the top 3 since 2000 were 2002 class, 2003, 2002. And Brock Harris is 2026. You're talking about a quarter century of that never changing. And now you're getting a guy who will be, whenever he enrolls, Matt, he's going to be viewed upon to have an instant impact at the tight end position. It's a great sign for BYU. I thought it was noteworthy, too, when he commits. You're seeing Ryder Lyons comment about the commitment. And look, Ryder Lyons also commented about one of his Folsom High teammates this week committing to USC. And USC's obviously been linked to Ryder Lyons. But, they're heavily involved with Ryder Lyons. Bot Molitalo, an offensive tackle from Lone Peak High School. This could be an incredible run for BYU football. And I think a lot of people have wondered, can BYU football break through and get a recruiting class that's nationally recognized like we've seen from basketball? I think they can. And this is the first piece to really establishing a big-time recruiting class for this 2026 cycle.
And this, to me, this is the path forward for a perennial Big 12 championship contender. Because in the past 20 years, as we just laid out, these type of recruits that have obvious connections to this university, whether it be through church affiliation or through family ties, I'm just throwing out a number, and I know it's not accurate, but less than 50% of those guys have been coming to BYU.
Oh, yeah. Think of all the players that are LDS that you just say, man, if BYU was in a power league, and I know that coaches, especially in Kalani's early part of his tenure, I remember having a conversation with Ty Detmer, and he's like, conference affiliation, we're not losing anyone to conference affiliation. But see, clearly they were.
Yep.
They just were. Like, it was, and then up north.
It wasn't. I do agree with Ty when he says it's not that people necessarily dreamed of playing in the Pac-12. It's that the Pac-12 was a gateway to playing at the highest level.
You're right. And I think we've learned that now. I think, at the time I thought, I buy that a little bit because there's so many special qualities with BYU football. But now that you jump into these leagues and the exposure you get, this is pre-NIL, and then the competition of every game truly mattering. Like even 2 years ago when they were a 5-7 football team, that BYU-Oklahoma State game had a lot of juice. It was Oklahoma State could go to the Big 12 title game. BYU's going to a bowl game if they can win it. There was a lot on the line. Independence, there just wasn't. And look, that sounds reactionary compared to, because in the moment, I think we all tried to look at that and think it was a positive. But BYU now is in a different tier. They're showing that they're willing to compete. As you heard from Keith Vorkink earlier today, they want to be competitive at the highest levels, and the Big 12 has just been a massive springboard for BYU athletics, and nothing is holding them back. Now, I do think, too, what's interesting when you talk about LDS recruits and having connections to BYU, unlike basketball, where there's a lot of top 10 type of programs that recruit at a high level in the Big 12 football, no one's a consistent top 25 recruiter. No one. Every once in a while, TCU gets in the mix. Texas Tech, UCF because of their area code, maybe Houston, who's got a 5-star quarterback in this cycle right now. But BYU, can they establish themselves as the annual top 25 recruiting program? That's on the table. And if you're leveling up the NIL efforts, because to get a Brock Harris, you got to have an NIL package. You're not just getting these legit recruits anymore without some sort of NIL. That's exciting because basketball, we're seeing it, but football's leveling up as well.
And the Brock Harris thing's the key to becoming a perennial top 25, in my opinion. I'll die on that hill. You've got to bat 75% or higher on those type of guys, and you got to love the direction that they've been trending in that regard.
And we're seeing more and more over time LDS young people play football. A lot of high schools in Utah are putting a lot of resources into football. Basketball with Kevin Young and his worldwide connections, and I say worldwide because he's got a guy like Tim Fanning who's going to coach the Netherlands under-18 team in FIBA championships this summer. They've got international connections on that staff. Football, it's going to be more regional still. Like you want to have that national footprint, but still you want to go up and down the Intermountain West or the Wasatch Front and be able to rope this area off. If you can get the Wasatch Front and the LDS kids, you're going to have a really good football team, and you're going to be one that's potentially in the playoff conversation every single year. So I think that BYU, if they can get these top LDS guys, but also try to rope off the Wasatch Front and contend with Utah, who's in the same league, but BYU's got a lot more momentum right now, that's huge for BYU. So this is a big recruiting win, which could be a real special summer. And I think what's interesting, too, is that the old traditional thought is a lot of the recruiting would heat up in November, December, and January. It's going to be this summer. Official visits are going to happen in May and June before a shutdown period in July. We're going to learn a lot about this 2026 recruiting class over these next 2 months, and this could be a really special run potentially for BYU football on the recruiting trail this offseason.
Wow, that's exciting. Let's take a break, Mitch. Hour number 3 coming up next. We'll keep hitting on some football. We're in the offseason, but there's still plenty of juice and news in the world of BYU football. I had a conversation with star defensive tackle transfer Keanu Tanavasa. We'll get to know him a little bit more and talk about his family life as we get to know a key piece to this BYU defense coming up in hour number 3.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for 3. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back in. It's Cougar Sports Saturday. Matt Baiamonte and Mitch Harper. We've had a lot of great interviews. Of course, they all exist on our podcast feed, Cougar Sports Saturday, wherever you get podcasts. But if you missed these, well worth a listen. Here you go. Interview with Keanu Tanavasa. Keanu, I want to start off asking about your proposal. And what do you remember about that day? And was that the most nervous you've ever been?
That was, it was very similar to meeting her dad for the first time. When I met her dad for the first time, I was probably similarly scared, but that one was a little bit more, not necessarily fear and more so, oh my goodness, I hope I don't like cramp while I'm on a knee. Just different things. And so, best day of my life, best decision of my life.
What's the story there? How did you guys meet and ultimately get to the point where you're at now?
Initially, we saw each other at a dance. We were scouting each other out, and I saw her and I needed to talk to her, and the night finished and I was a wuss and I didn't talk to her.
It's hard at times.
It can be hard, and so at the end of the day, I prayed and was like, God, please give me another opportunity to see that girl. A week later, we go to a devotional and we met and we started talking, and then from then on, it was, so perfect. She just matches me and makes me such a better person. And I don't know how to explain it. People say that you know when you know, and there's no other way to explain it other than that.
When's the big day?
May 1st, so 30
Whoa,
days.
it's coming up.
Yeah.
What? Where are you getting married?
We're going to get married in the Taylorsville Temple, and then we're going to celebrate in Draper.
Honeymoon plans?
We're going to Hawaii.
Oh, great choice, man. Great choice. Which island?
Oahu, where my family's from.
Oh, dude, that is one of my favorite places on earth.
Beautiful, beautiful place.
You guys just going to hang out? Do you go into a nice resort? What's the plans in Oahu?
Yeah, we'll go to the resort over there. The beach is everything. We'll visit some of my family. My grandpa's out there, so we'll get to see him.
Where does he live out there?
He lives in Laie. Okay. That's where my family is from. Born and raised. My dad's over there, and so I went back over there. So
you were born. How many years did you spend in Laie?
Well, so my dad was born and raised. I'm actually from California. Okay. We were born and raised in the Inland Empire of California. Okay. And then after my mission, I moved out here. My family then moved out here, and we've been out here since.
What brought your family to the mainland, and why did they leave Laie?
What moved my dad to the mainland was my mom. Okay. He met my mom at Snow College at a gas station. Fair. And she changed his life, and he was like, I'm never going back, And obviously they've been back, but, he's lived his life with her, and they've been together in California. They raised us there, and now they're back here in Utah with one more boy, little boy at home going to Lone Peak, and then siblings are out here other than one, but they got grandbabies, and they're enjoying their life out here.
So do they call Hawaii home, California home? What's home for them?
Utah is home now. I think I've talked to them, they've been here 4 years now. And as we've talked, they're like, we're officially settled. We miss the moments that we had in California, but that's not home anymore. And they still they're in Hawaii right now, actually. But Utah's home.
I'm jealous. I wish I could be going to Hawaii as often as possible. So that's awesome. You're having your honeymoon there.
Yeah, I can't wait. And, beautiful place with an even prettier woman. So hopefully she hears that part.
I hope so too. How excited are you to go into a football season with a spouse, just to have a kind of a support system and someone you can lean on during, football's a grind, right? And is that something you're looking forward to? I'm
more driven than I've ever been to play the sport of football because I have more of a reason to. I've had such a huge drive within my life to become the best version of me, first and foremost to give back to my Heavenly Father and give Him the glory. Second is to provide for my mom and my dad. I want to take them to lunches. I want to give them all the things that they gave me growing up. I was blessed, even before my fiance, with nieces and nephews, and they changed my view of the world to give to them. And then now with her, there's such a different feeling of why I do what I do that I've never been more excited to go into a season, one, for the joy of spending it with her, but more so for the performance of then recognizing that what I do gives value to her, not the monetary value, but within the who I get to become and what I get to do to give back to her.
How does BYU fit kind of where you're at in your life and what you want to do going forward?
BYU is a place of love and direction. And that's exactly what I need right now in my life, of where I'm headed, and who I want to become. And what that is based around, the faith and family here, the humble but hungry attitude, and then the ability to love the process and learn as I'm going. And that's who BYU is. That's what they do. And that's exactly what I need in my life.
I imagine you have NFL aspirations. How beneficial has it been so far to have a position coach like Sione Bohua, who, played at the U, but had a long NFL career? What's it like learning from him?
I call him a savant. So a savant is someone that has mastered their craft and has understood it to levels that other people wouldn't even understand. Even if you play the game, you might not even reach that level of understanding of things. And Coach Bohua is a savant for sure. Because he's constantly in the business of growing his understanding, his process of joy and learning, and being able to be a part of that is second to none. He's in my opinion, the best D-line coach in the country.
What kind of feedback has he given you on things you need to maybe tune in on or improve in this off-season period before fall camp?
Coach Bohua has helped me to refine my skills by frog hairs of a growth. And that's what I love is that's part of his understanding is, this is my 4th year in college football. I've played since I was 7 years old. So I have so much experience under me. And so he's like, some players in spring ball and fall camp will take 10% of growth through that 2-month period. He's like, for you, we want to get you frog hairs of a length better, because that's what the champions separate is within. Once you're at 90%, can you get to 90.5 and 91.5 and 93? And that's within the things that he's teaching me, and what he's sharing is where I feel growth.
What's training in the off season gonna be like for you this summer?
It's going to be extremely player-connected and player-led. So obviously it's going to be strenuous. We're going to do it with the strength staff, but we're trying to add value because the great teams are player-led. And we're trying to add value in the sense of the leadership taking over within little film studies. It doesn't have to be dedicated, but it's little intentional movements that will separate us from the pact of the country and the norm of college football teams being led by their head coach.
Last thing for you, Keanu. This team was 11-2 last year. They were moments away from playing in a Big 12 championship game. Do you sense the hunger here to take that next step and to go deeper into college football's, highest stage?
I think there's a feeling of unsatisfied nature and taste within their mouth. I think I might have a little bit more than them because I went 5-7 last year, and that was some of the roughest experiences. And I hate losing, and so losing that much was, I still can feel those things. I have it on my vision board of never forgetting that. But they definitely have that unsatisfactory taste and that drive to go become sealed in, the College Football Hall of Fame.
Thanks for the time. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding, and we'll see you in the fall.
Sir, thank you.
There you go. Getting you ready for BYU football. We're taking the break here on Cougar Sports Saturday. Back with more football on the other side. Stay with us.
Welcome back in. Good stuff with Keanu Tanavasa, a big-time difference maker. And I like, too, that he is, it's not just about, how do I say this? I mean, in BYU football, Mitch, I don't think a lot of these guys are at BYU for money alone. Yeah. It's not like basketball. The numbers aren't as wild as they are in college basketball. So that's not it. But I like that Keanu Tanavasa has come to BYU in search of development across the board. He wants to become a better football player. He wants to become a better individual. Feels like BYU is going to give him that opportunity. And I love that he's taken the leadership mantle. And it feels natural, too. At least that's how I felt in my conversation with him. Do you feel the same way?
I do. And sometimes you wonder if it's too good to be true, because it just seems like it's a perfect fit. Like it just feels like maybe it's because we've known his name for so long.
Right.
We know firsthand how good of a player he can be and impactful, but But
they needed that with the departure of Tyler Batty, and so I think that that addition is big time. But that conversation happened a few weeks ago, and we got more. And we're going to be rolling them out over the next couple of weeks. You spoke with Jake Retzloff. We had Carson Ryan, Bruce Mitchell, Trey Alexander. I know I'm forgetting a few names, but those interviews will be rolling out. So if you haven't already subscribed to the pod, Cougar Sports Saturday and Cougar Tracks as well, subscribe to those podcasts. Great content on both of them. My question for you is, after having those conversations, because we talked to people for well over an hour, and it was at the very end of spring football, did you learn anything new during those conversations that changed your expectations for this upcoming season?
I learned that, I don't want to say if it was new, but I do feel like there is a lot of confidence with this team, similar to last year, that they really do believe that they can do something special. And I just think there's no lack of confidence. Maybe it's just the personalities of some of the guys we spoke to, but there's a real belief that they can break through and get to the playoff. I think that's just, again, stands out to me because I feel like you got to have that belief. You got to have that confidence, that attitude in the program that you belong. And BYU believes that they came up short. Coming out of spring, there was not a moment where I just felt like BYU players were tapping each other on the back and just feeling like, we've arrived, guys. Like, now it's smooth sailing. Like, let's just do what we do, and we've arrived. Like, I don't get that sense at all. And that's exciting, too, is that they seem really motivated to right the few wrongs. There were not many, but they were few enough to prevent you from getting to your goals. They want to get those righted and fixed this season. So that's one of the biggest things to me. From a news standpoint, there was no real earth-shattering new revelations. But I think another thing that I would add, too, was I talked to Isaiah Glasker, and that was another guy that I hit on. And I talked a lot about, the portal and the consideration to leave BYU and what kept him here. And he said the biggest, consideration for maybe not coming back in 2025 was the NFL. The portal was not really a thought for him, and he did not want to consider it because of his commitment to Kalani Sitake. And I just thought, wow, that's impressive, because a guy that had 12.5 tackles for loss, led the Big 12, he's got just awesome measurables.
And throwing, he did a beautiful prime dance in the Alamo Bowl.
He hits the portal, man. He's getting big money, like $750,000, $800,000. There'd be a huge market for him
in a Big Ten or SEC team.
No
probably.
question. Or even a Texas Tech who was paying for the number one class this year. I mean, they would love someone like that. And for him to say, I'm staying, I want to be at BYU, I love this defense, that it was a reminder, too, that maybe this whole develop and retaining guys can work in a climate where I get so fixated sometimes on the portal. Maybe that old school line of development and retaining guys can still work in this college football.
I walked away from that just feeling like this team is really tight. Like there is a good chemistry there. Now, because of the nature of football, and in particular, if you really look closely at that 11-2 season last year, Mitch, it wasn't that far away from being 7-5, 6-6. So when you look at it that way, they could be just as good as last year's team, and they lose those 50-50 games, and they do not meet expectations. That's entirely on the table. But last year's team, there were a lot of question marks about how much improvement there was going to be from one year to another. And I think this year, they're just much further ahead than last year. And the additions they have brought in, I think, have fit really nicely. Their experience, too. That's something I really like. Carson Ryan, the tight end, he's an old guy in college football. He's played in different systems and different roles. He can adapt. Tanuvasa, who we touched on, we know how good he is. He single-handedly destroyed BYU's offensive line in that rivalry game last year. He was unstoppable in that game. So I just think that this team, unlike what we're hearing at Tennessee, where their quarterback is skipping practice in spring football because he doesn't like his NIL deal, you don't have any of those problems. And I think in football, maybe even more so than basketball, that really matters. When you have 11 guys pulling on the rope at any given time, all 11 have to be dialed in. If you got one who doesn't know their assignment or messes up on a play, it can change a football game. I like that this team just seems really dialed in. They're together. They are pulling in the right direction. They're content with NIL and just the way things are in that program right now. I think there is value in that.
There is a lot of value in this. BYU football program is trending up, and BYU sports in general trending up. Both programs this past season finished number 13 in the AP Top 25 final poll, the only other program to claim that for one academic year for the both revenue-generating sports, Tennessee. So that
the Vols, there's a lot of similarities.
Who would have thought we'd get two Tennessee references in one segment? But it's been a big year for BYU sports. But again, what's exciting too, we've talked about a lot today, but just there's still more to be had. And I think that's what's a lot of fun for Kalani and Kevin Young. And like, you've got your leaders now. You've got your coaches. Kalani's not facing a pressure cooker of the hot seat. Even though some would say last year that there was no pressure on him. Look, if he had had a losing season, there had to have been a conversation. There would have had to have been a decision from Tom Alwyn. You cannot tell me otherwise. Well, he gets an 11-2 campaign. Now he gets a long-term extension. You know Kevin Young's the guy in basketball. Now it's time to take it even to higher levels for BYU sports. We're taking a break. On the other side, we're going to play an interview with another BYU football commit, going to be joining the program this year, Nusi Taumoi-Peu, a former Stanford signee. He flipped to BYU. He'll talk about why he's a Cougar next here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
We're going to play an interview with BYU football commit Nusi Taumoi-Peu. Nusi, first off, congrats on the commitment to BYU. What's been the reaction in your inner circle, your friends, your family about you flipping to BYU?
Yeah. Man, it's just so overwhelming. And first, just want to thank God, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you, Mitch, for having me on this podcast. It's such a blessing, So I just wanted to say that first thing, but it's been so overwhelming these past, one day. I posted it yesterday and just been overwhelmed with love by not only BYU fans, but like you said, my family and my friends close to me. They're just so excited for me to take this next step, and they all feel like this is the right place for me to be. And I feel the same way, So like I was telling everybody else, I'm just ready to get to work, but just taking it all in at this moment. And, I'm overwhelmed with the love and support. So I appreciate you guys, Cougar Nation.
The next step has been in the cards for you for some time as far as elevating your career to college football. You've been a heralded recruit for quite some time, piling up offers from coast to coast, really, from the West Coast all the way out east to the likes of Miami. Take us through the recruiting process, because you initially signed with Stanford. Just kind of go through what the original recruitment was like for you.
Right. So I got my first offer by Oregon State as a D lineman, towards the end of my sophomore year going into my junior year. And I made the transition to linebacker. So that's when some teams, kind of laid off and recruited me as a linebacker then. And BYU was one of them, and Stanford was also one of them. And, just going through the recruitment phase, taking my visits, just felt really good about, going to Stanford. And I did until the unfortunate events of the firing of Coach Taylor. And I loved Stanford. I loved the staff. I loved everything they had going, and I wanted to be a part of it, but things happened and, BYU was calling. I couldn't refuse them, and I always felt like that was home for me. It just took me a little while to understand that, but God has a way of working, and he told me to move. So, I had to and be obedient to his voice, and now I'm here. The recruitment process has taught me so much, but it's also built me as a person and my character and just understanding myself a little more, during this process. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm back home.
Along with being back home, playing a role in your decision to go to BYU. What stood out with the coaching staff, with Kalani Sitake, Jay Hill, this defensive staff? What stood out to you with them?
Man, not only are they just, great coaches, you see what they do on the field. I mean, we seen the season they had last year, but they're just great people, and I can say that with an honest and truthful heart. They're better people than coaches, if that makes sense, and they're great coaches, so that speaks high volume of who they are. And it's just so good to be surrounded by them and that environment, because it makes you want to be better for them. It makes you want to throw everything you got on the line for them on the field on Saturdays, and so not only are just great coaches, they're great people, and their coaching styles are so, intense, and that's one thing I love about them is, they're loving, but with love it comes intensely, and they just want the best for us, all players, and that's one thing that really stuck out to me. And, Coach Kalani, obviously, probably the best head coach in college football right now, just the way he loves and provides for each and every one of his athletes, and his children and his family. Just a great man to be around and an example for all of us to look at and wanting to be better as people ourselves. So, it's just a great environment to be around.
So when you announced publicly that you were going to, decommit from Stanford on the heels of the coaching change with the Cardinal, was BYU right there first on the line to call you?
BYU was, I think right when Coach Taylor got released, it was just, they reached out quick, and so I was like, wow, they're actually the ones that told me about it, so they were on it quick, and they understand where my heart was, and they made it happen, and so I'm just grateful for them for giving me this opportunity.
When do you plan to arrive on campus and get things started?
Sometime in June. I know they're going to give me a couple weeks off, after graduation. I'm actually not sure. I'm pretty sure it's June 21st when I'm actually supposed to report, but I know I can report earlier than that, so we'll see how it goes.
What do you think of the potential of BYU right now, Newsy? Because I look at this 2025 recruiting class, and you're one of the top guys in the class, but it just feels like there's some momentum building for BYU football right now. And yes, they had a successful season last year, but there's this sense that they want to accomplish more. Just what's the vibes, if you will, of what you're sensing around BYU right now? Yeah,
I mean, there's a reason I'm here too. I'm here to win, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in that. And what BYU is doing, bringing in recruits and with the coaching staff and everything going on, especially after last year's, momentum builder, and just seeing how they did, I could tell. I only went to one practice. I went to the practice on Friday. I could just tell we want to be better than that, and we're striving to be better than that, because we know we can and we know we have the potential to do so. And so, building off the momentum from last year, it's looking great. The potential is always great, and so I'm just excited to see how I can contribute to the team, but just with the intensity and the demeanor of all the athletes when I went to practice, it's just looking really great, and definitely one thing I want to be a part of and want to contribute to.
And so do they project you to be, you noted that you had a change over to linebacker in your high school career at Westlake. Where do you project to play at BYU?
I know it's been in the talks for me to be a hybrid type of player.
Yeah.
The Fred Warner, the Kyle Van Noy's, the Isaiah Glaskers, of the defense. So, but wherever coach sees me fit, I'm willing to do so. So, but yeah, just more preferable to be a hybrid.
Have you ever seen highlights of Sione Takitaki, a former BYU linebacker?
Yeah, man. How could I forget that? I'm crazy for that, But yeah, no, Sione, he's a man, and there's a reason why he's still in the league, and as well as with the dudes like Fred Warner and KVN, and because they did their thing in a position, and they had a great coach under them, Coach Popinga, and so I'm so happy to be a part of the family and be taught by, one of the best coaches to do it out.
Well, and I asked that too because your game kind of reminds me a little bit of Taki, and I'm sure that.
Thank you.
And just when did you begin playing football? Was it always just something, in you that you just always took to early on? Because before this call, we were talking about the Taumaipeau name and how it's deep connections to the game of football. Was it just something that was always second nature to you, or did it what you're kind of talk about your evolution with the game of football.
Yeah, like I was saying, I went to a BYU game when I was 6 years old. Love of the game kind of started there, and just watching Fred Warner, fly around on that field versus Michigan State, it's something I'll never forget. I was with my 3 older brothers and my dad, so my dad seen the fire in my eyes, and he took me out to go train with my older brothers, and since then, I just been on that same track, on that same road, and thankful for my support system to keep me going. And so now I'm here.
How supportive is your family of this move to BYU? What do they think of you playing at home in front of family and friends nearby?
Man, they're so happy. Like, I've never seen them so happy before, in a long time, So just this decision, I felt like it was meant to be for all of us, and I'm happy it's that way, because without my family, if it was for my family, I wouldn't even want to play football, because they're the ones that drive me to it, and so I always have a reason, and that's why I love the game of football. It's because of them, and just to see them excited makes me excited, and it makes me want to go to work. So, just keep wanting to take the next step, and with the support, I'm willing to do that, and I know I can do that. So, just so thankful for them.
Last thing for you, Nusi, and again, appreciate all the time here. It's
no, I appreciate you.
How rewarding, or how much do you enjoy causing havoc on opposing offenses? How rewarding is that for you?
Oh, I mean, when you take a deep breath and you're watching film, it feels so good, and so, I mean, man, just doing what I do, it's a blessing for sure, and it speaks volume of the hard work that I didn't just put in, but my family and my friends, and the sacrifices they made as well, and when I go out there, I have a chip on my shoulder, and I always play like that, and whether that be wrecking the quarterback or taking the ball into the touchdown, running in, I'm, just blessed to play the game of football, and I'm always going to do my best, and I'm always going to try to do my best on every aspect of the game, and that's just the fire I play with, and, just like I said, playing with that chip on my shoulder, and wreaking havoc, that's the name of the game. So, and that's the brand of football I'm willing to apply on this college football scene. So, I'm ready to get to work, and I'm excited to see what I can do.
He's Nusi Tamoipeu, newest member of the BYU football program. Again, congrats, Nusi, and looking forward to seeing you on the field with your Westlake teammate, too, Saleh Fano, as well, down the road.
Yes, sir, that's right. And Maverick McManus, he's actually on the mission. So, yes, sir, I'm waiting for them.
There's going to be a little bit of a Westlake pipeline to BYU. Appreciate it, Nusi, and best of luck.
Thank you, Mitch. It was an honor. I appreciate you, boys.
Welcome back in. It's been a good show today. Lots of great interviews, lots of great content breaking down BYU basketball, the landmark, and that's too strong of a word, but a big-time signing in Rob Wright committing to BYU from Baylor, shoring up that point guard position because they had no point guards on the roster. Elijah Crawford still in the portal, Down Hall committed to Virginia. So that we covered it all. If you missed any of this, there's a lot of great content in this episode. Go to the podcast feed. I loved your conversation with Keith Forkink. Good stuff. There is stuff in the world of BYU that we have not discussed, and we will do that here in Cougar Tales. Let's start with women's hoops, Mitch. Last week, we were off. It was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints General Conference. And so we did not get a chance to chime in on the new head ball coach. What do you think of them removing the interim tag from Lee Cummard and making him the official head coach?
Very happy about that move, and it's what we talked about when they dismissed Amber Whiting. If you can get Delaney Gibb back, give him a chance. And clearly Delaney Gibb wanted to play for Lee Cummard. She says she's all in. She's coming back, and Lee Cummard's doing a nice job. Look, BYU women's basketball, they're not as well-resourced as other teams. And I asked Lee Cummard about the fan base side because I feel like that's the missing piece for that program.
Yep.
They've got the potential, but they have no fans. They don't have enough. Like, I think people listening are like all cheering for them, all the Cougars fans listening.
But they're not going to games.
What's the incentive to go to a women's basketball game? The atmosphere is not there. Like, the style of play has not been there last few years. What's it going to take? And so that's going to be the challenge in front of Lee Cummard. But I think one thing that you're going to come away from with BYU women's basketball going forward, they're not going to beat themselves. They're not going to make all these mistakes. And player development's going to happen. I think with Lee Cummard, I don't know what his ceiling is with recruiting. Like, is he going to... Because Amber Whiting got big-time talent. She got Delaney Gibbs. She got heralded prospects. I don't know what Cummard's potential is to consistently do that like Whiting did. But when you get a Lauren Gustin, when you get a Delaney Gibb, you're going to see player development. Lauren Gustin didn't get better with Whiting as the coach. She just didn't. She had no offensive game. She was a great rebounder, but no offensive game. I think, and I bring this up because it was so profound and in your face with men's basketball, the difference, the leap that Richie Saunders took. That's what, Lee Cummard has got to do, because they're going to still always get more under the radar recruits, like 3 stars, maybe an occasional 4-star, but develop them. The Big 12 women's basketball is not as great as the ACC, the SEC. This is a league you can climb in a hurry. TCU did it. So I think it's a great hire. I think Lee's going to do an excellent job. He deserves this chance, and I'm very excited to see what he can do.
I like the hire. I am curious what's different now than when he did not get the job and Coach Whiting got the job.
The on-court product was a big piece here. I mean, BYU women's basketball, they'd have games where they'd have 31 turnovers. Like, if you just take care of the ball against West Virginia, a top 25 team on the road, you're probably winning that game. There's probably 5-6 games. That Utah game where they lose half-court heave at the buzzer, moments before, Delaney Gibb turns the ball over. It created an opportunity to lose. There was 5 or 6 games last season where you lose based on turnovers.
Yeah.
Take care of the basketball, and I think Lee Cummard can maybe do a solid job there. Also, the coaching candidate pool is light, and Lee wants to be at BYU. He's a BYU guy through and through. I think it's a great fit, but it is a fair question. Like, why not just make this move earlier, back when Whiting? But I think Whiting, she did have her daughter Amari, who was a all-world recruit. And look, she was maybe not the same player after the ACL injury, but it made sense at the time. Like take a flyer so you can bring in the daughter and see what this thing can become. Well, you learned in 3 years that it just was not a winning product. Now Lee Cummard's got to restore it back to order.
I do like early returns on his recruiting.
Yeah.
You mentioned Delaney Gibb retaining that. He's only lost one player to the portal, and that was Whiting, and you can understand why she wanted to transfer away. And then you go ahead and you get Olivia Hamlin, Southern Utah, not college player, but from the region of Southern Utah, St. George area. She flips from Nebraska to BYU, a prolific scorer, averaged over 20 a game, a good offensive weapon. That's a good sign. Like some of these sports, don't make it harder than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Get the best prospects locally and then build from there. And I think it's a good start for Lee Cummard on the recruiting side.
And I'm really curious to see what BYU Athletics does with, enhancing the game day environment. I mean, I'd go to some of those women's basketball games, Matt, and it was a drag. Like, I'll be honest, like, you get 1,500 people there, and there's no energy in the building, and it's a tightly contested game. It's the under 4 media timeout, or let's see, I always get it mixed up in women's basketball with the quarters, but you get the point. There's just no energy in the building, and they're doing turbulence, and it's not hitting the same when there's only like 1,100 people. It's just not the same, and I just feel like that's such an X factor. Like, if you're Cummard and you're bringing in a recruit, and a recruit's looking around and going, that's big. Like, that leaves an impression when you go to a men's basketball game or you go to a football game. That's going to be the challenge. And even volleyball, women's soccer, they've got great game day environments. Can they enhance that for women's basketball? If they can, I think this program can really be something special. I do. And I want to see Cummard get it to its potential, because I think it's there.
Switching gears to football, Mitch, the Saints, the only reason I even bring this up is the Taysom Hill angle, but Derek Carr might be having off-season surgery. Any chance Taysom gets into the mix?
I hope so. I would love it. Him coming off an injury is as well. I'm very skeptical on that, and the draft's still coming up in a couple weeks.
They're going to draft someone.
They have to, and so I just don't feel like he's going to have a few other players get banged up in season for him to have that opportunity. But
I think the thing that does help him, though, is that his new head coach, Kellen Moore, Jalen Hurts is a dual-threat guy.
Yep.
Taysom is going to be, by all accounts, the only guy similar to Jalen Hurts on the roster.
but he hasn't started a game or really played many quarterback snaps. Last year, he barely played at QB. I mean, it's been, what, a year and a half, 2 years? Dennis Allen did not play him at all at QB, and I think that's what's different, whereas Sean Payton, even though he was the Swiss Army knife with Payton, he'd still get a nice share of reps or snaps at quarterback. Last 2 years with Allen, there was just really no opportunities at QB.
Unfortunately, I just think he's too old and too banged up to really get a shot. But I don't know. You never know. With a new coach and Derek Carr being hurt, maybe there's an opportunity, but probably not.
I'm glad you bring up Taysom, though, because I saw him on an Instagram ad. Him and his wife were sitting on a couch promoting. It was like a religious movie.
Dude, that movie looks fantastic.
It does. And I'm just thinking, what a great guy.
I know.
How can you not love Taysom Hill?
I got one piece of advice for Taysom.
I think I know where you're going with this.
When you show up to a game, wear the logo.
Yes.
Jimmer does it.
Yeah, he was all in.
One of his companies, True Wear, even makes BYU apparel.
Come on, Taysom. You got to get that
$2 for $1.
stretch Y on you. Come on.
Get that stretch Y, man.
Come on, Taysom.
Even if it's he's not a hat guy. I've never seen him in a hat, but even a hat would work.
Which is kind of surprising because you think QBs always having the hat on the sideline. Like that's always
Good point.
That's a QB look. Like looking at the Microsoft Surface tablet, got the hat on. Yeah, he's never been hat guy much, but Taysom Hill, much respect to that guy. Total. If you're a brand and you want to align with someone,
Taysom Hill.
It's a good pick. Yeah, Taysom Hill.
He's the man. All right, Mitch, we're out of time. Been a great show. To all of you BYU fans out there who listen to this show each and every Saturday, we love you guys. We salute you. We wish you a wonderful summer as the weather's getting warmer, and we'll see you next. Wait, are you going to be here next? Are you on vacation?
2 weeks. I'll be on vacation.
Okay, so you're with us next week. You're with us next week. Okay, we'll be back next week. Maybe breaking down some more portal stuff. We'll have to see. But until then, have a great weekend, and thanks for listening.